Today on Sports Central, we'll be going over our next final prediction of this offseason, and it will be over the Seattle Seahawks, in which this is a team that went 12-6 overall last season, 11-5 in the regular season. But today we're going to be going over 2020 and whether the Seahawks can make it to the playoffs again, and whether or not this team can improve on how they were in 2019. We're also going to be going over your returning production along with a full preview and prediction on every game on Seattle Seahawks schedule heading into next season. So with that, let's look at your season trends from 2019 for this team. Of course, once again, they were 11-5 in the regular season last year with a 12-6 overall record, and they were 6-2 between September and October. Then they were 6-4 between November and the postseason. So, yeah, this is a very consistent team all season long. They were always really good. Of course, towards the end of the schedule, though, it started to get much tougher than how it was in that first half of the schedule. But all around, still a big season for the Seahawks, going 11-5, especially in their regular season. Some of your key wins from last season: they beat the Steelers 33-3, I believe, on the first week of the season. That was a huge win there. Of course, the Steelers at that point in the season weren't healthy, so that was a big win there for Seattle. They also had a shutout win against the Dolphins, 45-0. And I understand it's the Dolphins, but really any win that you can get in the NFL that's a shutout definitely is a very impressive. And yeah, they also had a big win at the Bills, 16-10 on September 29th, followed by in November they had a win against the Eagles on the road, 17-10. And that was a very important win there. Of course, the Seahawks going into that game, we're looking at a pretty good playoff spot, so that certainly was a big game for them. And they also had a big win against the Cowboys, 13-9 at home. So yeah, once again, all around a great season for the Seahawks. But looking at returning production for next season, and the returning production looks really good, I would say. I mean, they returned their star quarterback, Russell Wilson, obviously, and yeah, he put up over 4,000 yards last season with 31 touchdowns and only 5 interceptions. He was actually, he was quietly one of the best quarterbacks in the league last season, and really he's been kind of overshadowed by, say, Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson, especially last season. But really, he quietly had a great year. I mean, no one's really talking about him, but he also had a great completion percentage at 66%. So, yeah, he's got a lot of potential going into next season, especially if he can continue that and improve on his completion ratio too. And also considering, his weapons are going to be much more experienced going into next season. Of course, one of his biggest receivers in DK Metcalf being able to go into his second season now, that's going to be huge for Russell Wilson especially, is to be able to have a more experienced weapon than Tyler Lockett. They also returned their top running back in Chris Carson, big return there as well, as he had just right around 1,500 yards with 9 touchdowns last season. He did have a bit of a fumbling issue, though. He had 7 fumbles last season, so that's something he does need to improve on. But still, once again, all around a great season for Chris Carson, and I expect that to continue into next season if he can stay healthy. They also returned their second running back in Rashad Penny, which, of course, he was expected to be this team's running back 1, I believe, going into last season. But he had 450 yards with 4 touchdowns last season. So, yeah, he was still able to put up a decent amount of yardage. But, Chris Carson definitely was the leading running back for this team for the majority of last season. As far as the receiving core goes, you return your top wide receiver in Tyler Lockett. Of course, him and DK Metcalf were way up there for being the best receivers on this team last season. And there's a big gap between Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf and the rest of this receiving core. But yeah, Lockett last season put up over 1,000 yards with 8 touchdowns. Meanwhile, DK Metcalf put up 910 yards with 7 touchdowns. And so, especially as a rookie, DK Metcalf had a great season, no doubt on that. They also returned their tight end Hollister and their third wide receiver in Moore. And, of course, Hollister last season, he had a pretty good season, 350 yards with 3 touchdowns. And then, meanwhile, of course, you got Moore on the other side, which had 326 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, yeah, of course, they got a really good receiving core coming back, and I think that's going to be huge for Russell Wilson especially. As far as the losses that this team has, they no longer have their center Britt, and as well as their guard Fluke, so this offensive line does lose a couple, but they also gain in a couple of really great players, but they also lose their defensive end in Jefferson. And then their linebacker, Davion Clowney, he's going to be a free agent now, so he will likely no longer be with this team next season. Same with their defensive tackle Woods, he won't be either. As far as their defensive line goes, you lose Ansah on your defensive line, and then you also lose another linebacker in Kendricks, as he is going to be a free agent too. So the linebacking core, it does have a couple of question marks for the Seahawks next season, especially losing 2 pretty good linebackers with Clowney and Kendricks. As far as the players that they bring in a new tight end in Greg Olsen. Of course, he's coming from Carolina, and he's had some really good seasons for the Panthers. And of course, at the tight end position, it's always, if you can get a good tight end, that's always huge. And for the Seahawks last season, who had Hollister, he put up 350 yards But I definitely think if Olsen can stay healthy and play a good season for the Seahawks, I mean, you could expect him to put up 500 yards at least. I mean, once again, Olsen's been a great tight end in the past, and I expect that to continue. But the only problem that I have with Greg Olsen is because of how injury prone he is. I mean, he's dealt with so many injuries over the years, and so if he can stay healthy, that's going to be huge for the Seahawks. But, I mean, I wouldn't make any promises on whether or not he will stay healthy or not. So, yeah, as far as the receiving core, though, you also bring in Philip Dorsett from New England, which that's going to be a big addition to this receiving core as well. I mean, to have a good, experienced wide receiver in there, along with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, that's going to be a big addition to this team. They also bring in another running back in Carlos Hyde, and of course, this running back core already looks pretty good. But I expect Carlos Hyde to probably be this team's running back 2 next season. I mean, I'm not expecting a whole lot out of him, but I'm guessing him and Chris Carson will probably be your 2 main running backs for the Seahawks going into next season. So, yeah, they bring in a couple of big-name players, especially offensive players, coming into this season with Olsen, Dorsett, and Hyde. But overall, this team is looking very different going into next season, but I would say in a good way. As far as your schedule looks, you start off the season on September 13th against the Atlanta Falcons on the road, and that's going to be a big game to start off the season. Of course, the Falcons next year, I don't expect to be any crazy playoff team, but I mean, the Falcons, I do expect to be a team that could contend with the Seahawks, especially in that game. So that's going to be a close one. Watch out there. Then you have the Patriots and the Cowboys, 2 games at home, thankfully. But yeah, both of those for sure are going to be tough ones, and I expect those games to be close. And it'd be huge if the Seahawks, especially. I mean, if this team starts out 3-0 next year, I would expect a big year for the Seahawks. And then you got the Dolphins to start off your October on the road, followed by a game against the Vikings at home. So that's going to be a big one there. You got your bye week in between the Vikings and the Cardinals games. So you have to travel to Arizona after your bye week, and then you have your first big game against the 49ers to kick off your November. And then you got a big game against the Bills on November 8th, followed by a trip to Los Angeles to play the Rams. Then you got the Cardinals, Eagles, Giants, and Jets in that order. So you play your 2 New York teams in back-to-back weeks. And then you got the Redskins on the road, followed by the Rams and the 49ers on the road to finish off your regular season. So, yeah, I expect those 49ers games to be huge. I mean, those 2 games especially are going to have big impacts on the season. I mean, for the 49ers, I expect them to be just as good this season as they were last season. So, yeah, for the Seahawks, you got to win those 49ers games. But yeah, there are several other impactful games on the schedule. I would not consider the schedule to be one of the tougher ones in the league. Of course, you do have a couple of tough road games, but all around, I mean, the Seahawks definitely have a good chance to put up some pretty good games in, or some pretty good wins throughout this season. As far as the first half of your season looks, I think you go 5-3. I think you take a loss to the Falcons to start off the season, and I went back and forth on that one a ton. I mean, you could go either way for sure. I mean, the Seahawks are the more talented team than the Falcons, but I think the Falcons, with them being at home, they've got a pretty good home field advantage going right now. So I think the Falcons in general, I think, are going to be pretty fired up heading into that game. And I think they get the Week 1 win over the Seahawks. I do think you get wins, though, over the next couple weeks against the Patriots and the Cowboys. So you are able to go 2-1 through those first 3 games, which once again, as I said before, their first 3 games are going to be very important for the Seahawks going into next season. On the 4th, you got a game against the Dolphins, and you guys are going to call me crazy for giving them a loss in that one. But I think the Dolphins in general next season could be very improved. And I think, I mean, the thing is that I always say to everyone when I pick a loss is you can't just look at the game. If you look at the game, you're going to be inaccurate. You got to look at the games around the game that you're looking at. And so if you look around the Dolphins game there, you got to play the Patriots and the Cowboys in back-to-back weeks before taking a trip to Miami to play the Dolphins. And let me remind you, like, Seattle is way across the country from Miami. I mean, that's going to be a large road trip. So the Seahawks are going to have a very small week, or a short week going into that Dolphins game in general. And after playing 2 pretty tough teams with the Patriots and the Cowboys, I just think the schedule does not set that game up right for the Seahawks to get a win there. And once again, in general, I mean, with the Dolphins and having 2 in there, I think they definitely could be a very improved team going into next season. Like, I'm not expecting the Dolphins to be a 3 or 4 win team. I mean, this is a team that could get 7 or 8 wins next season, I think. So, yeah, you got to watch out for the Dolphins there for sure on October 4th. I think the Seahawks take a loss there. I do think you get 3 straight wins, though, against the Vikings, Cardinals, and 49ers. Once again, those 49ers games are going to be huge, I think, next season, and especially on November 1st. I think the Seahawks get a big win against the Niners there, and so they go into your November 8th matchup against the Bills with a 5-2 record. And I think you take a loss in Buffalo. I mean, the Bills next season, I think, are going to be a team that could put up 11 wins. I mean, who knows? They can maybe even win their division over the Patriots. That'd definitely be something. But I think the Bills in general are going to be a tough game. And I think, once again, with it being a large road trip, I think the Seahawks are going to have a tough one in there, and I think the Bills pull out the win in the end. But the Seahawks do keep it close. I do believe all three of those losses that I'm giving the Seahawks so far are going to be close ones. As far as the second half of your schedule goes, I think you get 2 wins against the Rams and the Cardinals. Then you take a tough loss in Philadelphia against the Eagles, which the Eagles next season are another team that I think, not really anyone's talking about them. But they're adding in a couple of big weapons, and I think they definitely could be a team that can make it right back to the playoffs next season. So watch out for that one. And I think you get 2 wins against the Giants and the Jets, and then you also beat the Redskins and the Rams. However, that last game on January 3rd against the 49ers on the road, the Seahawks really don't have all that tough of a schedule heading into that game. But the 49ers in general, it's just going to be a really tough game on the road. And it's kind of like a deja vu from last season when the Seahawks and the 49ers played. Of course, he was in Seattle the last time. And the winner basically, like if the 49ers won, they'd be a 1 seed in the NFC playoffs. And if they lost, they'd be a 5 seed. I'd expect a similar situation there in that game. And I think it's going to be very impactful. But I think the 49ers, with them being at home, of course, they've got a good home field advantage going in their stadium. So I think the 49ers do get a win there. And they get a win over the Seahawks to finish out the regular season. But yeah, your record prediction nonetheless is going to be 11-5 next season all around. Not a bad season for the Seahawks. Certainly I expect them to make it to the playoffs, and they'll probably, I kind of expect them to lose to the 49ers in that last game especially. That's going to kind of give the 49ers, I think, the division win. But I think the Seahawks will make it to the playoffs. They'll probably be a 5 seed, I'd assume, in the playoffs. It could easily be that they make it to a 6 seed. Who knows? But with an 11-5 record, I'd expect them to probably make a good case to get that 5 seed in the NFC playoffs. But nonetheless, yeah, your prediction stats for next season, you're going to be 8-0 at home. So I expect them to be undefeated at home next season. However, the road's going to be kind of bumpy, I think, for the Seahawks, as they will go 3-5 on the road next season. I think you go 5-1 in the AFC or in the NFC West, and then the NFC conference you go 9-3. So yeah, all around, I think it's going to be a great season for the Seahawks. They're going to take a couple odd losses, but still, every NFL team, I don't care what NFL team it is, you're going to take a weird loss down the stretch. And I think for the Seahawks, your weirdest loss will be against the Dolphins. But once again, you can't just look at the game. You got to look at the games around it. And for the Seahawks going into that Dolphins game, you got to play the Patriots and the Cowboys in back-to-back weeks. 2 really tough games there. So I think they do take a loss against the Dolphins. And that's kind of the reasoning why. But yeah, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the Seahawks. Let me know in the comments below your record prediction as well as your game predictions. I'd like to hear about those. But once again, thanks again for watching. If you enjoyed this preview, be sure to slap a like on it and subscribe as well. It really helps out the channel. I'd really appreciate that. But as always, thanks again for watching. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central, and I will see you all later.